Hi, I'm Marcia Roscoe, leading the Breathing in Christ community since 2013. Breathing in Jesus, examining what's most important to live into our desire to love God, ourselves, and others deeper. Genesis 2:7 tells us that God's holy breath forms us. Are you ready to consciously connect to Christ one breath at a time? Are you ready to honor every aspect of your life, what you say, what you think and do, as sacred encounters with God and others? Breathing in Christ discovers the life God intends and is here to help you align your habits and your behaviors with God's love. Because after all, how we live is how we love. Again, this is Marcia Roscoe, and welcome to the Breathing in Christ community. I am thrilled to have back with us here at Breathing in Christ a Christian minimalist, author, blogger, and Lost Reality TV show cast member, Pastor Becca Ehrlich. Becca, thank you so much for being back with us today.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me again. It was so fun last time. I'm glad we get to do it again.
Absolutely. So last time that we connected, we were mid-season. So we paused. You talked about your chronic illness, the death of your son, and how your faith led you to Costa Rica. But quite a bit has happened since late August, and the Lost Resort season, the first season, has come to an end. So we have another 5 weeks filled with this variety of rituals and practices. So can we unpack some of those for our audience?
Yeah, that sounds fun. Let's do it.
All right. So the last time we talked, you had just had your one-on-one with Aqua, but we hadn't yet seen the sweat lodge yet. So can you share that whole experience with us?
Yeah, it was probably the most intense ceremony we did. I wasn't actually, I'll be honest, I wasn't planning on doing it at all, because extreme temperatures are a trigger for my chronic illness. But when we got there, Christian, the medicine man from Peru, said to us, we understand there's someone here who can't do extreme temperatures. We actually made the first round less hot than it usually would be so that everyone can try at least one round. So in that moment, I said, okay, I guess I'll try it. And then I ended up staying for 2 rounds, which was surprising to me because I was just getting so much out of it spiritually. And that was great. I mean, it was the first time in a very long time, years, that I had really felt God's presence powerfully. And I was sitting next to Miko, and that was the first time she really kind of let herself go and experienced what was happening. So that was really powerful as well.
So what do you think it was about that, the sweat lodge experience, the setting, the scenery that allowed that to happen for you guys?
I think a lot of it is, it's just the concept of surrender. Like you're basically in this hot box and there's nothing you can do about it. So you kind of have to just be like, okay, I'm in this thing and I'm just gonna let it go and see what happens. And for me, the symbolism, it's supposed to be like a new birth, right? Because you're basically in this hot womb and then you come out and they pour water on you and you're supposed to scream like you're being reborn. So for me, that symbolism of rebirth and being reborn, it's a strong symbol in Christianity as well. So it was kind of like a sweat lodge remembrance of baptism in a lot of ways.
Right, right, absolutely. So then coming out of that, explain for us the second rage ritual. Like, how is that set up? Do these rituals flow, one into another in the sense of, is there this deep intentionality? Like, okay, you just had this sweat lodge experience, kind of this remembrance of baptism for you, and then going into the second rage ritual. What was that like in the intentionality in perhaps the order of the rituals?
Yeah, so there were actually a lot of other rituals in between that you didn't get to see, unfortunately.
Well, tell us more about those.
Yeah, yeah. So there was a kava ceremony where we drank a mixture of kava kava, which is um, a plant medicine, and that was really cool. We had that. We had the cacao ceremony where we drank like really strong cacao. And we had a sound bath where we had a sound bath practitioner come and do the different sounds using singing bowls and other types of instruments while we meditated. And so there was a lot of other stuff between those two ceremonies that kind of got us to that second rage ritual.
Okay. So having heard that, what place were you in emotionally, spiritually before that second rage ritual, and how did you come out on the other side?
Yeah, I don't. There were very few of us, if any, that wanted to do the second rage ritual.
I can imagine.
I think you could see that in our faces too.
Yes,
Like,
you could.
we walked up there and we were all like, you know. But I think in a lot of ways, for some of us, it was very healing, and it kind of helped us mark where we had been and where we were going in the whole retreat, because we had done one right at the beginning and now we were doing one near the end. And so I think ultimately it helped us work through some stuff that had come up throughout the retreat.
Okay, so you almost felt like it was like a bookend.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, kind of like how we had ecstatic dance near the beginning and then we had it at the end too. So we kind of mirrored the beginning and end of the retreat.
Right, right. I think it was, and correct me if I'm wrong, the vulnerability circle is really where I think you powerfully and inspirationally named that you found more healing than you expected.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, is that about the time in the retreat where you felt like all of that deep healing was really unfolding?
Yeah, I mean, it takes a while, right, for you to kind of get through the layers of stuff. And so um, all of my feelings were coming out of my eyes during that
Ah, yes.
vulnerability circle in ways that I didn't expect. And it had been stuff that I knew kind of existed in me, but I didn't realize how strongly I had been telling myself those lies until that moment, I think.
Mm, wow. I mean, the power of letting go of these false illusions, and really wrestling with what is true and what is truth, right? I mean, we hold on to these what we think are truisms, yet like the powerful gift of surrendering and allowing God's truth to be present. Is that what you experienced?
Yeah, because I mean, the whole like exercise was limiting beliefs, which is a pretty typical thing
Yes.
in psychology. And we all have those that we've sort of internalized from childhood or experiences or whatever. And so I've had those limiting beliefs for a while. And I don't know, naively, I was like, I'm coming on this retreat and I'm going to work on, working through the grief of not having biological children as an option. And I'm going to work on natural stress relief because stress is a trigger for my chronic illness. And that's what I'm going to work on this retreat. I naively thought I wasn't going to work on anything else. And that's just not the case, right? Like I worked on my spirituality stuff. I worked on that connection with God. I worked on all of those limiting beliefs that I didn't know would come up in the middle of a retreat. And so I think going into a retreat and being open and letting things come up as they come up is a big part of the process.
Yeah, as you're speaking about that, I'm thinking about how as leaders, we tend to compartmentalize or put like different parts of our being in silos. Like, oh, I'm going to deal just with this. And sometimes we disregard the fact that our whole being, emotional, mental, spiritual, well-being is all integrated. And so, yes, when you set that time apart, it does open up and unpeel all the layers of the onion and make space for that. So I can see how that happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So there was another really pivotal moment, at least from where I was sitting. You can correct me if I'm wrong. The healing art exercise ritual where you were all invited to affirm one another with what you saw in one another by painting on the body. And there was a wide variety of adjectives used for each of you that went through this retreat. But there was this moment when healer was painted on you that I just remember. I just felt like your breath was taken away and I was right there with you. What was that like for you?
Yeah, I almost started crying.
Yes, I saw that.
I don't know. I mean, I'd never really thought of myself in that way.
Mm,
And that sort of came up near the end of the retreat too. There were I had a one-on-one with Atassier where that concept kind of came up of me as a healer. Because that's just not, I don't know, when we think of ministry, Christian ministry, we don't necessarily think in those terms.
right.
And so it just wasn't something I thought of for myself. And then when that was written on me, I was like, oh man. So I could kind of claim that for myself now, because I think those who are set aside for Christian ministry are healers in a lot of ways, and we don't necessarily claim that identity in that work.
Right, right. I'm going to ask you a question, and you're allowed to take a pass on this. But what do you think they saw in you that you didn't see in yourself? Like, what are the charisms or qualities or perspectives of healer that they saw that you didn't?
I mean, I think I just assumed that like the caring aspect of what I do and part of me is just innate. I didn't necessarily think of it as part of being a healer. But helping people work through major life situations is a healing action. And it just, I don't know. I was able to do that in some fashion during the retreat, periodically for my fellow retreat guests. Sometimes, obviously the healers were there for that, but sometimes in the middle of the night, like you're not going to go to one of the healers. So,
Mhm.
so we had a lot of deep conversations in the middle of the night or otherwise, and I think people saw that, and I didn't even see that in myself until that moment.
Right. Well, that makes sense to me. There were sacramental moments that I could pick up on, especially as you offered a remembrance of baptism as a starting over ritual. So, you also remarked about how rituals are so important. I think that the direct quote that you said was, they give us a chance to formally mark where we have been, where we are, and where we are heading. And you alluded to that earlier as you reflected on one of the rituals, but this healer, you kind of embodied that in your presence. Were there other experiences like that on retreat that we didn't get to see, that the healer in you was brought out?
Yeah, actually, so when we were at the waterfall, I did a remembrance of baptism with Christine first, and then I did a smaller one with Miko later. And that was pretty powerful in a couple different ways, because I know Chris at that point, Christine was kind of on this journey and was feeling kind of lost, and I was like, "Hey, you want to do a remembrance of baptism so that we can, mark this space and where you're going from now?" And we did that. We actually have a picture of that, which is a really cool picture because I'm like about to dunk her,
Nice.
which is really cool. And then I did a smaller one with Miko. She didn't go in the water fully, but she didn't. That was not her thing. But we did it on her forehead, and that was pretty cool because she had kind of wasn't sure where she was in her Christian faith, and so that was kind of a way for her to be like, yeah, I think I want to get back into this. And then after Brandon left, after Christine and Thea and I talked on the beach, I did a remembrance of baptism with Thea as kind of a restart for her, her new life. And so it was really cool to be able to do all of that with folks. It was neat.
What a beautiful use of your spiritual gifts, Becca. That's awesome. That is awesome.
Thanks.
So, like throughout the course of the retreat, we know that there were 5 like primary healers, and it also sounds like there are plenty of other healers that were brought on to the retreat location that maybe we didn't hear about. But in our last episode, you had talked about Aqua, but how about the other 4 healers? Are you able to share a little bit more now that the season has ended, how the other 4 healers impacted your spiritual growth and healing?
Yeah, so actually, I had a one-on-one with all the healers while I was on the retreat. Unfortunately, you don't get to see all of that because they only have a certain number of minutes they can show. But I did a one-on-one with Benjamin, where he literally made a personalized meditation practice for me. Like he wrote it out for me. We did it together. He showed me how to do it. And that was really cool. I'd never had that before. Like I never sat down with someone who was a meditation expert who could, explain a personalized way for me to do it. And he really did make it for me. He had it where at the beginning I would do some creative movement because I really like moving with my body. That helps me connect with God really well. And so that was really cool. I had a one-on-one restorative yoga session with Oniga that was really powerful because one of the reasons I wanted to come on the retreat was to find natural stress management ways. And I had never really done restorative yoga before. I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah.
And so we got to see Miko's restorative yoga session, which was great. So ours was similar, though we did different poses and things like that because she knows I deal with physical pain. And so we modified it for that for me. And that was fantastic. And then I did a one-on-one with Atasia that was also really powerful, which was a mix of energy healing and Reiki, and channeling. And that was really cool. And that was kind of the first time he had kind of used the word healer in reference to me.
Mm.
And so that was really awesome. So all of them have such great, amazing healing gifts that they got to use during the retreat that maybe we didn't get to always see all the time. But know that all the four of them have really great gifts.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So like when you think about, you went into this Christian pastor, um, opened yourself up to this wide variety and spectrum of ways to engage your relationship with God and your spirituality. Do you see ways that you will either continue personally, privately, and or corporately in these kind of practices or rituals in your ministry?
Yeah. I've actually incorporated some of the breathing techniques and meditation stuff in prayer, both for myself and then when I pray with other people, for sure,
Yes.
which is cool. And obviously that's in the Christian tradition as well. That's not something that totally freaks people out because
Right.
there's breathing prayer and centering prayer and all those practices where we do use the breath and use maybe specific spiritual words as we breathe and pray. So yeah, I use that a lot. I throw down a yoga mat and do some yoga poses and stretches pretty regularly now. That's not
Right.
something I did before. And honestly, just claiming the identity of healer in what I do has been kind of life changing because that's not something I ever really thought of.
Oh, that is beautiful. So one of the things that you had also said was how being in this helping, I'm going to add the word healing profession, can cause us to bury emotions. And that's because we have to focus on what's at hand and we push down our emotions in the moment. And so knowing that you're kind of carrying this healer intent moving forward, how do you see yourself able to not bury your emotions?
Yeah, well, in the moment, you kind of have to compartmentalize
Sure, sure.
because you're dealing with it in that moment. But letting myself feel what I need to feel when I'm not having to deal with that moment right then is really important. Sometimes I wasn't super great at that. Like sometimes I'd do that and sometimes I wouldn't, and I would just push it down. And so I think the importance of working through the fact that you're helping people in their really intense moments in life, and that you're going to feel something while you do that as well, especially if it's someone you have a relationship with. So being okay with feeling those emotions when it's safe to do so and you're not having to be focused on the helping in that moment.
Right. So I wonder if for you, is there any connection with the ecstatic dance? Because you really seem to love that. You mentioned that earlier about the retreat ended and the retreat began and ended with that, and that you feel close to God when you're dancing. So is that at all connected to a way that you will tend to your emotions and your relationship with God?
Yeah, I've been doing that a little bit more than I used to. It's harder in the pandemic, right?
Yes.
But we actually reorganized. This is so random. We reorganized the furniture in our living room so that there's more space to move, and so I can actually, do yoga poses and dance around a little bit in ways that I couldn't before. So I'm able to do that a little bit more now, and kind of, work through emotions and connect to God through dance.
Right. So for those that don't know what ecstatic dance is, what is it?
Yeah, it's basically working through emotions and connecting spiritually while moving your body. So it sounds scarier than it actually is. Like you don't need to be a trained dancer to do it. You just move to music however you feel like you should.
Okay, so it's like an intuitive, heart-centered, not head-centered practice, obviously.
Yeah, it's creative movement.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So, you know, it was obvious to us on the outside that there were some deep bonds and relationships that get connected. I mean, I've led many retreats, never as long as what you have been on, and I know the deep power of bonds and friendships that are created. So now here you are, the end of October 2020. What kind of relationships still exist for you, either with your castmates or with the healers on the site for you?
Yeah, yeah. So Miko, Christine, and Thea and I actually have a text thread that
Nice.
we text each other regularly, which is really fun. Miko renamed us the Soul Sisters,
Oh, that's awesome.
which is really fun. And I actually talk to the most of the healers pretty regularly. especially Onika and I talk. When we get on the phone, we end up talking for like an hour and a half, which is super fun. And we're, we're the two that live in the Northeast US, because she's up in New York City. So before the pandemic hit, we were actually planning on going to see each other. And then it just didn't work, unfortunately, because, pandemic. So we're hoping when it's safe to go see each other.
Right. Is there any particular kind of healing modality that you weren't engaged in before? You named the yoga, but I'm thinking more of in the sense of having a guide accompany you that you will now seek, like whether it's the shamanic principles or the Reiki. Is there anything that you feel called to carry on in your own spiritual journey?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind, Reiki or healing or energy healing type work. My experiences with that were really good during the retreat. And I wouldn't mind necessarily doing that. I haven't pursued that because pandemic, but I could see myself using some of that again.
Yeah. Nice. Nice. I think all of the audience was rejoicing with you when you, at the end, really just proclaimed your ability to finally feel the presence of God again and immediately came home and wanted to start the adoption paperwork. I mean, I think you had us all in tears, Becca.
Oh.
So, can you just share with us that insightful revelation that you had, or epiphany, if you will, that you were ready, like you came home ready to engage in that? Like, how did your husband Will respond to that? Like, what was that like for you?
Yeah, I did not expect to be able to do that right after the retreat. That was not what I expected. I kind of thought, oh, maybe I can work through some of this and maybe in like a year or so I'll be ready. I didn't think that after a one-on-one session with Chrissy, that I'd be able to come back and be like, yeah, I'm ready to fill out the adoption paperwork. Let's get going. It was really powerful. That's all I can say. It's, people kind of, I don't know what the word is, poo-poo some of these alternative healing modalities, but they can really make a difference in how people see the world and how they're functioning in their own healing journey. And so it changed my life for sure.
Right. Yeah, and it sounds like being set apart, that you engage a wide variety, and maybe not everything, spoke to you, but you were open to receive whatever it is that would be helpful, and the result was extended time away. And it seemed to clarify for you where God is in your life right now and your ability to notice God's breath within you. Is that true?
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think, my husband will definitely notice that too. I don't think he expected any of that either.
Right.
He was pleasantly surprised.
Right. So like what would you say is next for you in your walk with God? Like where you're at now, what's next in terms of your own spiritual growth?
Yeah, I just want to keep noticing and working on things that I experienced on the retreat. Definitely working in more creative movement and ecstatic dance in my spiritual practices. That's definitely something I want to continue. I kind of stopped that when I got sick, and so it's nice to know that I can incorporate that, but just listen to my body and make sure I'm not pushing myself too hard, because that's a big part of me and a big part of my spiritual life. And I think also just being okay with, just sitting and being. I've never been someone who was particularly good at that. I'm a doer. And so that retreat really pointed out to me that like, it's okay to like, just sit and be with God and listen.
Yes.
Cause that's really important.
Yes. Be still and know that I am God. One of my favorite breath prayers from the Psalms.
Totally.
Yes. Yes. So like we have the ability now to follow you and your growth down the road. I mean, I know you're writing some books, but just share with us, like, are we going to be able to walk with you?
Yeah. So I'm really open on my social media about my spiritual life and what's happening with that. So that's definitely a way to do that. My blog is a great way. Usually the stuff I'm working through is what I end up writing about in connection with Christian minimalism. So that's something that I do regularly as well. And I've been talking about maybe starting a podcast with my hubby, well, a spiritual podcast. So we'll see if that actually happens.
Hey, I would interview you first and get you practiced. Yes.
Yes, I love it.
Yes. No, that would be great. So just remind our listeners where on social media and the web they can find you.
Yeah. So Pastor Becca is my handle on Instagram, and Becca Ehrlich is my handle on Twitter. I also have a public Facebook page if you just search Pastor Becca Ehrlich that I post stuff on pretty regularly. And then my blog is christianminimalism.com. And that's where I write about intentional living and living more simply and connecting that to the Christian faith.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being with us. It is such a joy and an honor to know you and to be inspired by the many ways that you are paying attention to God's work in your life. So thank you for being with us.
Oh, thank you. And thanks for following up. It's kind of fun to have been able to do two of them, like halfway through the retreat and then after it was over.
Absolutely. And such a joy it is to celebrate the new life and the new spiritual birth that you've had. So we give thanks to God for that for you, Becca.
Yeah, amen.
Thank you.